why doesn't DeMar deserve the MVP? Why doesn't he deserve to be the next great Chicago Bulls legend to win an MVP?
Would you fall for me like I fall for you?
Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. It's your boy Dom, and we're gonna get right into things here today. So, today, we're talking about the worst offseason move the NBA made, right? We're talking about DeMar DeRozan, the MVP, whatever you want to call him. The man that was claimed by NBA executives, the guys that we look at to be some of the most brilliant basketball and team building minds in the world, right? You look at guys like Sam Presti with acquiring all of OKC's picks. You look at Danny Ainge for the trade he was able to pull off with the Brooklyn Nets years ago and acquire all those picks for the Celtics just for trading an old Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. You look at even a Sam Hinkie, no longer a GM in the NBA, but a guy that started the process, right? You look at other guys such as Masai Ujiri, commonly credited as one of the best GMs in all of basketball, a guy that traded for Kawhi Leonard and built a championship team. You look at Tim Conley from the Nuggets, a guy that consistently brings in more talent around Nikola Jokic year in and year out. Some of the guys that are looked at as the best GMs in all of basketball. You look at, I can't think of his name, but you look at the GM for the 76ers currently, the old GM of the Houston Rockets, a guy that was able to orchestrate the trade exactly that he wanted to acquire James Harden, right? He wanted James Harden all along. He was able to get him in the end, right? So you look at all these guys, and some of these guys are respected as some of the best minds basketball has, right? And they voted, at least half of them had to have voted DeMar DeRozan as the worst move of the offseason. But it wasn't, right? The Bulls front office, the new regime there, knew what they were doing. They brought in a guy, and now he's an MVP candidate. And I guess to look at that further, right, you look at DeMar DeRozan, a guy that's headed towards 20,000 career points now on his third team in his career, a guy that started off his career in Toronto and was famously traded for Kawhi Leonard, but was a guy that consistently year in and year out with his duo partner Kyle Lowry was able to bring the Toronto Raptors to the playoffs year in and year out. A guy that, went to the San Antonio Spurs, and his playmaking developed insanely under Greg Popovich, right? A guy that, he didn't have all these elite playmaking guys around him. He didn't have a Kyle Lowry around him anymore. So he was almost forced to learn, to develop, to become that playmaker that team needed. Now, DeJounte Murray is a very phenomenal playmaker in his own right. And though it was a guard-heavy room, not many of those guards were looked at as elite playmakers, right? Derek White's not looked at as an elite playmaker. He's more of a scorer and a defender. You look at a guy like Keldon Johnson. He's not much of a playmaker, and then he shifted down into a forward position. You look at a guy like Lonnie Walker, much more of just a pure scorer. So in a very limited playmaking locker room, DeMar DeRozan was able to take that and add something drastic to his game and become one of the better playmakers in the league, right? And then translate that directly over to Chicago. And something when you look at, DeMar DeRozan being signed in Chicago was a lot of the question marks were like the what if. Like, what if his three-point shot just is, or his lack of, is just too bad for this team to, be able to succeed. And he goes, and now he's having a career high three-point percentage season, shooting 38% from the field. His highest ever prior was in the 2016-2017 season, where he shot 31%, so a drastic improvement that he's ever had, right? And he's hitting game-winning three-pointers, game-winning two-pointers. His game is translated perfectly. His playmaking, yes, stat-wise, is a little lower, in part because you've got one of the better playmaking bigs in the league in Nikola Vucevic. You've got one of the best playmaking guards in the league in Lonzo Ball. You've got a very good isolation player in Zach LaVine who takes the ball out of DeRozan's hands at sometimes, right? Which isn't bad because he's a very good player. But he also did play point guard for a little bit for the Chicago Bulls, so he's not an awful playmaker. He can play make a little bit. More kind of in the offense than just true playmaking, where he's just kind of finding the right guy at all times, right? But he's not a terrible playmaker by any means. And so due to all this increase in playmaking around DeRozan, due to DeRozan significantly improving the Bulls' playmaking, the Bulls went from one of the worst assist teams last year to one of the best playmaking teams this year, and went from a non-playoff team last year to one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference this season. Right? You are looking at a team that is number 2 in the East, a team that was number 1 in the East for a very, very long time, and a team that is primed to potentially have a very, very good playoff run. I mean, this team is currently would be matched up against the Toronto Raptors, which when you're looking at the Eastern Conference playoffs, there are teams that people want to play because it's such a stacked conference. This is a conference that from the 1 to the 6 seed is a 5-game difference, whereas you look over at the Western Conference, from the 1 to the 2 seed is a 5.5 game difference. So I shouldn't have to say anything more, right? We've seen almost a complete polar switch in the conferences, right? Last year it was this kind of bloodbath throughout the West of anybody could, win it. Suns end up winning it, right? And, last year in the East, it was, okay, you got these like 4 teams. You got Philly, you got the Nets, you've got the Bucks, and like the Celtics or whatever, maybe the Heat, maybe 4 or 5 teams, right? These teams could win the finals. And none of them, not none of them did. The Milwaukee Bucks did end up winning it, but it wasn't like this, 1 through 8, yeah, anybody in there probably could win the finals, like it was for the West, or like it is now for the East. So it's a complete polar opposite switch that we've seen kind of in the league, and the Bulls are a big reason of that, because DeMar DeRozan has kind of had the Jimmy Butler or Chris Paul effect of this team, where it's his perfect fit. Right, and when you're looking at moves in the offseason, when you're trying to grade those, when you're trying to evaluate those, a lot of times your initial prediction is going to be wrong. I think even I was hesitant about the move. I was like, it may be a little bit of an overpay. I can see it working out. They're probably going to be a lower playoff seed. I did not see what was coming. I did not see a potential MVP season from DeMar DeRozan, right? I did not see this 31-year-old, 32-year-old basketball player to have his best season by far in his career, and to, even be in major media. Stephen A. Smith is talking about how nobody should be in the MVP race above DeMar DeRozan, and that's a very valid argument. I mean, when you're looking at the league, the top MVP guys that are currently holding that 1, 2, 3 spot is typically Joel Embiid, who's a number 3 seed, which is fitting for your seeding wise category, Corey. And obviously throughout the year, he has been dominant, not having another star player next to him for most of the season, averaging almost 30 points per game, 11 rebounds, and 4 assists. Now we could see that some of those stats drop off though, now that he's playing with James Harden, and so that may affect his MVP case as things go on. But if they do end up making the 1 seed and he only drops off 2 points, he's probably the MVP, far and away. But DeMar DeRozan should be right there in that conversation, because Jokic and Giannis are the next 2 guys, but neither of them are top 4 seeds, so they don't fit the seeding requirements. And although Jokic is having a historic season as a big man, as a playmaking guy, as a, on-off, and all these other numbers, he's blowing away historical stats for that. And he's a guy that is out here playing, if not better basketball than he did last year when he won the MVP, right? I'm trying to pull up his stats here, and he's a guy that's having 25, 13, and 8, and is just playing phenomenal. So obviously he's in the MVP race, but he's only the 6th seed. And so if this team, as it gets healthier, doesn't capture one of those top seeds, which right now in the Western Conference is very, very difficult to do, because you're going to have to pass up a Utah, you're going to have to pass up Memphis Grizzlies, right? Some of these teams that have been playing some of the best basketball in the league to get one of those top seeds. And at this point, Denver might just be a little bit too far away for Jokic to repeat for MVP, right? And then you look at Giannis. Now, in that bloodbath of an East, he could still finish first. And if they do finish first, he's probably MVP, right? If Giannis or Embiid finish first place, they are probably MVP, right? And I think that's just something you have to accept. He's averaging, again, almost 30, 11, and 6. Very similar stat line to Joel Embiid. And obviously on one of the best teams in the NBA. Obviously a reigning finals MVP. Obviously a multiple-time MVP and a defensive player of the year in the past. So he's a guy that definitely has the opportunity to win the MVP as well, kind of being in that 3rd spot. But to say that DeMar DeRozan shouldn't currently at least be locked in at that 4th spot and potentially higher is kind of disrespectful, because he doesn't have to climb up in the seedings. He's already at number 2. He's above seeding wise any guy that I just named off to you. And for the Chris Paul argument last year, Chris Paul started to gain traction. Chris Paul was, threw himself really into the MVP conversation, but he was only averaging 15 points per game, right? This was a guy that was not out here being covering the stat sheet, right? Yes, he was getting his assists and he was getting 15 points per game and he was helping the team win, which is ultimately the best thing, right? He got them to the NBA Finals, but he didn't quite have the stats that we look at and need to see in the MVP conversation nowadays, especially with media, because we like flashy numbers, right? At the end of the day, we like flashy numbers. Is that right or wrong? That's a conversation for another day. But it's a fact. We like looking at flashy numbers. We like game winners, which DeMar DeRozan has. And DeMar DeRozan has those flashy numbers. He's 5th in the league in scoring. His duo partner in Zach LaVine on the wing is 16th in the league in scoring. And even his big man in Nikola Vucevic is averaging almost 18 points per game at this point, right? So he's a part of a big three. He's the one hitting the game-winning shots. And it's not one of those big threes where it's like, it's not maybe necessarily fully a big three, but it's 3 all-star caliber players together, right? I think to define a big three, you need to have a year in and year out top 5 player in the league on your team, if not 2, or at least 2 top 10, right? So I don't think there's any big threes in the league right now, in my opinion. But if you wanted to call it in essence a big three, right? A team that's been riddled with injuries but has continued to show success and to fight through it and shown a complete shift in culture throughout this season that they had versus what they had last year and the years prior, where we would see Zach LaVine give up on defensive possessions because he knows they're not winning anything, where we would see guys like Lauri Markkanen just kind of fade away and not grasp their potential or whatever. And now we see guys like Ayo Dosunmu, a second-round pick who's out here fighting for minutes, getting his minutes, crossing over Trae Young, playing good defense, hitting his three-pointers, and becoming a part of this team that maybe we never saw before. And this is a team that I think after that Patrick Williams injury at the start of the year, we expected to drop into that, kind of 5-6 range, right? Kind of where we expected them, maybe right out of that play-in spot there at the 7 and 8, right? But they haven't. They've stayed right at the top, and I don't see them dropping into that. Now, yeah, they could drop down to the 6th seed, but they're not going to drop into a play-in spot. The Toronto Raptors and the Brooklyn Nets are, I think, just way too far behind them at this point. And whether, with that only being 5 games, but there's only 20 games left. So for Chicago to have a complete shift at the end of the year to become a losing culture again, I just don't see as a probable thing to happen. And so more than likely, we're going to see this team as a top 5 seed, top 4 seed, maybe top seed in the Eastern Conference. And if they are that number 1 seed, why doesn't DeMar deserve the MVP? Why doesn't he deserve to be the next great Chicago Bulls legend to win an MVP? I don't know. Right? Maybe it's because we never expected DeMar DeRozan to be an MVP candidate. In years prior, this is a guy that was looked at as a top 20, top 15, maybe top 25 player. He's somewhere in that range. He's one of the better players. He can be a franchise player. He can get you to the playoffs and whatnot. But he wasn't looked at as a top 10 guy, which he might be now, right? With his career, almost, you can't even say resurgence because it's, he's surged his career higher than it ever has been, right? This is by far and away his best season, and it's not even like a Victor Oladipo thing where he's just now breaking out maybe later in his career, because he's been good. He's been a franchise player for Toronto when he played there. And I think one of the most interesting things that we could see in the playoffs is obviously a Chicago Bulls versus Toronto Raptors series, a series that currently is set to happen, a series where I think, the Bulls would be able to, yes, they're going to be a lot of perimeter defense on Toronto's side, but they're going to be able to take advantage of the lack of interior defense, with the Nikola Vucevic on the team, with the mid-range shot ability of DeMar DeRozan, and you're going to see a former franchise star for the Toronto Raptors that they traded away to win a championship, now be on another team and potentially trying to knock them out of the playoffs. I think that's a super cool storyline to see, and currently we would be getting that, so I do hope that is a first-round series, and I think if that is a first-round series, we should see Chicago make out of the first round and potentially make a playoff run, because they're one of those teams like Cleveland and like Toronto that teams are trying to kind of position themselves to play. It's one of those weird years where teams want to play these teams. You saw it when the Boston Celtics went to the conference finals and took LeBron to Game 7, right? The Boston Celtics, because they were so young and because of all the injuries and everything, they were a team that people were trying to position to play in the first round, and they knew that. And the Bulls know it, that teams are trying to position to play them. The Cavs know it, being that young team that the Boston Celtics were, who I just made a video on a couple days ago. Make sure you guys go check that out. And the Toronto Raptors know it. So all these teams are going to be coming into the playoffs with a chip on their shoulder because they know teams want to play them. And that means that these teams want to play them even more. because they want to show them that they're wrong, just like the Celtics did, right? It's something I saw in a podcast with Jason Tatum and JJ Redick that I speak about a lot in that Boston Celtics video, on how, he talked about how they knew it and they were ready for the challenge, right? And that's exactly, it almost put, like, it took away all the pressure, and it made them feel, let's just show these guys that we aren't a team that they want to play, right? And that's exactly what they did. So Chicago could definitely very well do that thing. They have the top end talent, they have some depth and resilience that they've shown throughout the season, and I think they have the culture to win a long series. So if you get into the second round and you're playing a Miami, that's a team that you could potentially beat. If you get into the second round and you're playing a Philadelphia 76ers, who seems to be a juggernaut built by this trade where they got James Harden, it's a team that you could beat because you have gone through it all year. And maybe that 76ers team doesn't quite have that chemistry yet that they need. That game in, game out, end of the line chemistry that'll win you the game. They might not quite have that yet, whereas the Bulls, they've got it, right? They've got the game-winning shots. And the 76ers look fantastic so far with their new duo, but maybe the Bulls could stand a chance. And that's all I'm kind of here to talk about, is how DeMar DeRozan deserves to be in the MVP case. There's no reason that you should be putting any of these other guys over him significantly, because he's got that Chris Paul case that Chris Paul built last year, where he took this team that didn't make the playoffs to being one of the best teams in the league. And he also has those flashy stats that we love to talk about and see, and he's got the game-winning moments, he's got the MVP moments with these, back-to-back game winners, to end off 2021, to start 2022, multiple game winners throughout the year. He's got the MVP moments, he's got the MVP stats, he's got the MVP record. So why is he not at the top of the conversation? And I think that's something Stephen A brought to light. When Stephen A is throwing you out as an MVP candidate, either he is absolutely delusional in doing so, or there should and is a lot of buzz around you potentially being an MVP. And I think the MVP is very possible. I think it's hilarious how we're kind of using the start of DeMar DeRozan's name like we do with LeBron, the MVP, pack your bags, all that stuff. Le Disney, or it's a Disney, whatever the fuck his name, Le Mickey, whatever his name is, right? We do that with LeBron. Now we're kind of doing it with DeMar. It's kind of funny. But I think it's a real possibility that he could be in the MVP conversation and should be at the top of the MVP conversation. And from the Chicago Bulls perspective, this was the best move of the offseason. You look back to the offseason, it's one of the bigger moves of the offseason. There's the Russell Westbrook trade, which has gone down as a dumpster fire trade for the Los Angeles Lakers. And why wouldn't you call this the best move of the offseason, considering the ramifications it's had for this roster and this team and the success of this organization? And how good is DeMar going to be for the next few years, right? This is a guy that's on a contract for 3 or 4 years, and if he's going to be playing at MVP level for the next 3 or 4 years, another championship might be coming back to Chicago. You get a year where you can sneak into the finals. You get a nice path in the playoffs where you only have to play that best team in either the conference finals, the finals, or something like that. A couple injuries go your way. This is a team that could do exactly what the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns did and make the finals. This is a team that could do what the Toronto Raptors did and win the finals, right? So I don't think that's out of the question now. And no, yes, with it being the first postseason appearance for many people on this team. Now, Vucevic has been there as an end seed guy, an 8 seed guy or whatever. DeMar has obviously been there trying to compete for a championship before, but Zach LaVine has never been there. Ayo Dosunmu, a big part of this team. Kobe White. Some more of these guys haven't been there before, so it will be that first playoff experience. And part of the reason, the Cavs are very wished and hoped on to be played against in the first round, or in the second round potentially if they make it there. But this, because you've got some of that experience on your top end talent, it shouldn't be as much of a hindrance as it might be for some other teams. And I'm super excited to see what this team can do in the playoffs. I'm super excited to see if DeMar finishes as the top MVP candidate. And I think when it comes down to it, when it's all said and done, yes, Giannis, Embiid, Jokic, all these guys are very, very phenomenal and having very, historical seasons. But DeMar DeRozan is doing that in his own right. And there's no reason that him, and even a Ja Morant, shouldn't be in the MVP conversation, because both of those guys are doing stuff for their team that nobody saw possible at the start of the year. Did you see that the 76ers could be a top seed in the Eastern Conference, especially after the James Harden trade? Yes. Did you see that the defending champions in the Milwaukee Bucks would be a good team? Yes. Did you see the defending MVP in Nikola Jokic and the Denver Nuggets would be a good team? Yes. Did you see the Chicago Bulls, who were apparently viewed at by NBA executives to have made the worst move all offseason in signing DeMar DeRozan? Lonzo Ball was looked at as a bad move as well. Did you see that team would be running the Eastern Conference the way it has for the majority of the season and potentially be a finals contender? No. And I think that's a big thing that we're overlooking a little bit, and a big reason that however it goes, whoever's the top seed, DeMar DeRozan, when the votes come out, and now, he got voted third or whatever, that typically doesn't come back. I think the big time you see, this was a guy that was top 5 in MVP voting, is the Isaiah Thomas thing, where he was 4th in MVP voting the year that he was historical with the Boston Celtics, obviously predating his injuries and everything like that, and his trade to Cleveland and stuff, which sadly, his career went very downhill after that. But that's really the only time you kind of see guys talked about in the top 5 conversation. I think, DeMar DeRozan should finish top 3 just out of respect for what he's done for this organization and what he's been able to accomplish this year. So, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down below. Look out for a Kyrie Irving video tomorrow, because a lot of stuff is going on with Kyrie, and who knows, here, come playoff time, he might be able to play all 7 games in a playoff series. So, that'll be huge news for the Eastern Conference and may affect the Chicago Bulls, so make sure you guys keep a lookout for that tomorrow. But with that said, it's been your boy Dom, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.